Okay, hey everybody, it's Gabe the Nutritionist here, and today I want to talk about high dose vitamin A causing nutrient depletions. So, why do I say it this way? The reason I'm going to say it this way, just for, different purposes and different views, is because people, when they hear vitamin A toxicity, they're scared of it. It's often putting them in the realm of saying this is pseudoscience. But the fact is, it's a good marketing term. So I figured, how can we do this in such a way where people are going to be receptive to this idea? And the idea I'm putting forward, right, is basically similar to taking like a lot of vitamin B6. When you take a lot of vitamin B6, people have, issues. A lot of them tend to be with the nerves, like peripheral neuropathy, brain fog, low energy. That's because when people take a lot of B6, you increase their need for zinc and you increase their need for riboflavin, which is vitamin B2. So in the same way, right, Accutane, right, because we're taking such a high amount of it, other cofactors, other nutrients, contraindications, you have competition for different receptors, can cause other nutrient depletions because it's trying to keep up with this high amount of vitamin A. So if you read my last article or you saw the last video, you would know, right, that just 1 milligram of Accutane slash isotretinoin would be about 3,300 IUs, which is already above the RDA. So we're taking 5 milligrams of Accutane isotretinoin, or any other forms of it, then you're already way over the upper limit. And some people are taking 15, 25, 50 milligrams of Accutane, and for months to years. So let's say you take 50 milligrams, right, of Accutane. Well, in that case, what's happening is you're taking about 165,000 IUs of vitamin A daily, and in some people, right, twice. So if you can imagine, that's a lot of vitamin A your body's getting, right? And everything in the body is synergistic, it works together, it's very holistic in that regard. Vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, proteins, amino acids, everything you can think of, right? It all works together in some way, some shape, or another, right? They'll influence each other and they'll help each other. So when you take a lot of one thing, kind of similar to vitamin B6, you get this toxicity. And the reason I call B6 toxicity is because as it's stuck between the forms of conversions due to a lack of zinc or vitamin B2, it becomes toxic to the body, causing more oxidative stress. And much of the same reason when it comes to vitamin A toxicity and detoxing, right? Whether you're going through phase 1 detox, whether you're in the intermediate phase or phase 2 detox, right? The point is, you got to get enough of the right nutrients for your liver with the detox minerals and vitamins and cofactors that help to offset the oxidative damage that's causing it, right? Thus, inflammation, right? So I wanted to think of this holistically, right? So specifically, what's affecting your body, right? And we're going to go over this, right? So for example, right, Accutane can dry your skin, your eyes, your mouth by reducing the moisturizing oil secretions of the sebaceous gland. So it reduces acne, right? Because then you're not secreting this. So I say, right, perhaps, the mechanism induced is you're reducing biotin and riboflavin into a deficiency, which is responsible for the magical miracle of temporarily fixing acne. I think we're going to come to the point at some point where people are going to consider nutrient deficiencies as a way to fix things, when in fact it's just a bandage that'll get worse over time. We know too much of any drug can induce nutrient deficiencies. Accutane is a drug. It's a retinoid, equivalent of vitamin A, of retinol, because of the conversions in the body and how it's going to detox it. So we know, right, whether you take statins or you take H2 inhibitors or whatever it is, right? I mean, there's many books written about how you take certain drugs, you're going to need more folate, or you'll need more B1, or you'll need more B12, whatever it is, right? It depends on the drug and the mechanisms induced by the drug. So we'll treat Accutane similarly in that fashion. So let's start with vitamin D. So vitamin D can interfere with the function of how it interferes with the way your body works with it. And I say this because Vitamin A and vitamin D can be antagonistic. In the same way, vitamin A and vitamin C can be antagonistic, right? So too much of vitamin A will displace your vitamin D, and too for vitamin C. As we've seen with people with scurvy, they ate a high vitamin A diet, the pirates, and it was resolved by eating more citrus, which has vitamin C. But then we're also finding out that carnivores, right, that don't do organ meats, just pure muscle-based carnivore, right, they're not really getting scurvy, or at all really, or any symptoms of low vitamin C. But that tends to become seen with the ones that eat organs like liver and kidneys. So I do find that really interesting, how that connection must be made, right? So in the sense, right, when you look at the pirate diet, it's a high-dose vitamin A diet inducing vitamin C depletion because they drive up more demand for vitamin C, and so on, right? So with vitamin D, it can affect your bone health. It can reduce your calcium absorption because you need vitamin D to absorb your calcium. It can increase your parathyroid hormone, which means you have more bone breakdown, right, with the osteoclast. At the same time, with more osteoclast activity and reduced bone formation, some people, when they take Accutane, can have bone pain and osteoporosis. And most often, when you do testing, right, I don't know if you recall, right, but like every month or so, they got to test your blood. And I noticed from my own experience that the calcium was always low, despite me always, drinking a lot of milk growing up as a teenager. So I find that interesting. So again, you need vitamin D for your immune function. People argue vitamin D is so amazing, it should be considered a hormone because it does a lot for regulating the immune system. Metabolic health, it's been seen with insulin resistance and impaired glucose metabolism. So I want to know if vitamin D directly plays a role in that. And I say that because when I talk about vitamin D, I'm talking about getting vitamin D from the sun. I'm not talking about taking a vitamin D3 supplementation. Because when you go outside, you're getting sunlight, getting the UVA, UVB, you're getting a whole variety of infrared light, there's green light, there's blue light, the good kind. And all that's affecting, the physiology of your body, right? So it's often kind of hard to discern when you're looking at vitamin D studies, in terms of sunlight, what exactly is giving that specific benefit. Because as far as I'm concerned, right, taking a vitamin D3 pill is not the same as putting a star in a jar or putting sunlight in a pill. That's not how it works. So vitamin D is involved in neurotransmitter regulation, so it helps you with serotonin synthesis, modulates neuroinflammation, and when you disrupt vitamin D, what happens is the gene expression in the brain could be significantly affected, causing fatigue, low mood, or depression. So mechanistically, from a vitamin D low point of view, when you look at the black box warning label, it makes sense why it says you may have weaker bones, you might get bone pain, you may have poor immune system, increased inflammation, depression, fatigue, insulin resistance, and increased risk for osteoporosis. But again, right, this doesn't happen overnight. This takes time. People on Accutane, they take it for, months to years. So, yeah, this kind of thing can develop over time. It's not instantly. And there's a catch-22 with the sunlight, because you're often told to avoid sunlight because you have increased photosensitivity, photobleaching, and you don't want to cause skin damage. But in my opinion, in my point of view, I think what happens is your body has so much vitamin A, it doesn't really know where to put a lot of it, because it is fat soluble. So I might put it in the lipid of the skin, right? So when you go out in the sunlight, you actually sunburn pretty easily. And I think it's because your body's oxidating it to get rid of it. And if you're, kind of like seed oils, right? In the same vein, how people go seed oil free about a year, their body's depleted of the PUFA, right? The omega-6. And they're able to go outside pretty long. They go to the beach for like 6-8 hours and, like they get a nice tan and they're not red like a lobster with this burning, peeling, blistering skin. So it's a matter of asking yourselves, is skin health limited by what our body is putting in our cells? And I think the answer to that is going to be yes. So, like I said, right, skin, right, because, and also, right, you could have thinning of the outer skin, because vitamin A, right, the role in the body, right, besides, the eyes and everything else, right, It increases the turnover rate of your cells, specifically your skin. That's why people who put retinol on their face, right, they're like, wow, this is amazing, my skin looks nice and it's beautiful, but in actuality, you're basically burning and peeling off of the skin, and we're taking a very concentrated amount of this, vitamin A substance, right, when you do the conversions, and it's a lot of it, and it's in your body, and that's why people on Accutane, right, they could suffer for 5, 10, 20 years, after taking the drug, and still have these lingering side effects because they haven't gotten the body with the proper minerals, the proper vitamins, the proper amino acids to finally initiate and begin and to keep on the detox. So it's this upper layer, it gets burned. And, when it comes to vitamin D, K2, and calcium, there's this sort of trinity in their relationship. So vitamin K2 can disrupt and have a dysfunction in calcium metabolism. So it can interfere with vitamin K2, which is required for carboxylation of osteocalcin and, most importantly, matrix GLA protein. This is what regulates where calcium in your body goes. So you want calcium in your bones, in your teeth, and there's a few other places where it's kind of necessary, right, for certain things, but you don't want it going into, like your eye, right? You don't want it going into your skin. You don't want it turning into gallstones. You don't want it turning into stones in your arteries, right? Your coronary artery. So this could be a reason as to why some people could have issues with their calcium, despite not having a lot of calcium or despite taking a lot of calcium, right? It's a wee bit odd the way it works, but that's just, the mystery of the body we're figuring out little by little. So when it's insufficient, these proteins remain under-carboxylated and they're not as active as they should be. So excess vitamin A can exacerbate, much more of a vitamin K2 deficiency. So they both have to be, handled by the liver like everything else. Retinoic acid influences transcription factors through nuclear receptors, especially RXR, and it affects the expression of vitamin K-dependent proteins such as osteocalcin and, of course, matrix GLA protein. And when you have a lot of vitamin A, you have increased bone resorption, which is osteoclast activity, and reduced bone formation, which is interesting, right? Because you have osteoclasts that build bone. You have osteoclasts that chews bone, it gets rid of bone to be recycled. Then you have osteoblast, right, which builds bone. So it should be kind of balanced. So, but if it messes with it and you have more osteoclast, then you're chewing up more bone, in a sense, and you're not osteoblasting, building enough more of your bone, which could be why some people have this issue with low calcium, or at least they have the bone pain and the weakness there. And as it is, K2 is already low in the diet. I don't really see many people on the standard American diet eating fermented foods in which they will get their vitamin K2 from. So at the same time, people could have suboptimal vitamin D, right? Like it's below 30 nanograms per deciliter. I think that's is it? I don't know if I have the right one. Basically like below 30, right? Whichever is the standard testing. And they work synergistically because vitamin D increases absorption of calcium, while vitamin K2 directs it where it's got to go. An imbalance in either nutrient, right? An imbalance in either three can cause, some kind of issue with your calcium, causing dysfunction. So, as we know, you might have weaker bones, osteopenia, osteoporosis. You don't want vascular calcification or joint stiffness, right? Last thing you want is having more bone formation in your joint when that wasn't even your issue, right, with cartilage wear and tear. Now, as we know this, gotta fix that here. So, vitamin E. So, I've been trying to research more into vitamin E, and I've usually dismissed it because it's not something often talked about. And I haven't really pinpointed, like, what makes it truly amazing. But, it's not to say it doesn't do anything in the body, right? What I do see is it does help with lipid peroxidation, which means, and I'm already forming ideas in my head, I'm going to connect to zinc and copper and manganese, but that'll be for later, but let me just go through this. So, when you have a lot of vitamin A, right, you could cause issues with increased oxidative stress, in which your mitochondrial function lipid metabolism and redox balance, pro-oxidants and antioxidants, right? May promote generation of reactive oxygen species and increase lipid peroxidation, in which you have free radicals, it damages your polyunsaturated fatty acids, and what makes it so hectic, right, is when you have lipid peroxidation, it usually goes off like a chain reaction, causing extensive continuing damage. So the body has its own antioxidants to take care and deal it, because you don't want it to keep going, right? You want to stop the domino from falling. So vitamin E, primarily the most common one is alpha tocopherol. It's the body's main lipid-soluble antioxidant, responsible for protecting your membranes from oxidative damage. And the more it works, the more vitamin E is used up to neutralize these free radicals. And eventually, over time, if you're not repleting your vitamin E right, since you have increased demand due to the high amounts of vitamin A, then you'll be, more likely low in vitamin E. So, you might have an imbalance with vitamin E. Your antioxidant recycling systems will be overwhelmed, of course, because you got to deal with it through the phase 1, phase 2 detox. Because your redox status is going to be fighting the entire time, the regeneration of vitamin E could be impacted. Also, because of that, you have greater dependence on glutathione and glucuronidation, especially since we're talking about specifically vitamin A. This is not even considering, microplastics and heavy metals and mold and lime and any chemicals or drugs you might have taken. So, right, we're just talking about one pathway and one process. Well, two actually, because of glutathione, right? But I like glutathione for the job it does in between, the intermediate phase and phase 1. Okay. So you need to stabilize cell membranes and limit lipid peroxidation triggered by retinoid activity. Then it could also be argued that if you have seed oils, because, again, right, they cause lipid peroxidation, that it's a double whammy when it comes to affecting your cells, and you want them to be healthy and happy. So again, there's some research, when you look at it, that vitamin E can increase the amount of vitamin that's stored. I don't think it's bad in that it's trying to keep it. I think it's good in that it's trying to store it as protection. Because again, these are both fat-soluble vitamins. And when you store the vitamin A in the fat, it gives your body time to breathe, time to relax, reduce the burden of your detox. So, as I say, right, when the day comes, you're healthy, right? You're trying to be healthy, you're eating healthier, you're doing better things, and, you're promoting your health for longevity. Then you start detoxing, and because you're getting all the right stuff you need. And then you might feel kind of bad because now your body's going to, lose some body fat. It's going to release some vitamin A if you have stubborn body fat, and then it's going to detox it. So, let's see. Again, there's arguments about how vitamin E can help with aging, but if there's extensive lipid peroxidation, then it can look like, premature aging. Some people look, older, right? Like smokers and alcoholics. Neurological impact, again, the brain is rich in lipids. And again, right, the brain is pretty fatty and it loves cholesterol, so, people can't forget about that. So if you have a lack of vitamin E, it could in some way affect your brain's defensive ability to counteract the reactive oxygen stress, because we need to be protected, right? Especially your brain, right? And I'm not quite sure the extent of what may enter and leave the blood-brain barrier, but that is to be noted if some people, for whatever reason, may have a leaky blood-brain barrier. So, again, fat and oxidation, especially in LDL, particle plays a role in vascular inflammation when it becomes oxidized, right? So LDL, by itself, it's good, it's amazing, it's beautiful. Everybody needs to love it, right? It doesn't cause heart disease. However, with high inflammation, high oxidative stress, and you start to oxidize the LDL, then you got a problem. Then you got to be worried. And that's when you start to get the issues, right? Systemic inflammation, again, as a whole, antioxidants, if your army's depleted, you're going to have issues with your immune system and trying to fight the big, bad inflammatory pro-oxidants. So again, if it's consumed a lot, you may need to supplement vitamin E, but I need to research that extensively first because I think there's like 8 different versions of vitamin E. So, you don't want to do a bad one, you don't want to do the wrong one, and I need to do my research on this because I've never really looked into vitamin E as a whole, but as I've been doing this research, right, it makes me think we need to kind of look at vitamin E now. Because, I mean, I've looked at everything. It's just, I've never been interested in vitamin E for some reason. But, the time for everything comes, and, maybe I'll do a video on that in the coming month or so. So, again, bad example, but, this is in reference to having copper. You have the Haber-Weiss reaction. You have superoxide dismutase, right? To break down this superoxide, which is inflammatory. This then turns into hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is equally, if not worse, depending, right, even more inflammatory. So you need catalase, you need your glutathione peroxidase to break down this H2O2, the sequel to water. Terrible joke. But yeah, you break down hydrogen peroxide. And if not, if it continues, then you could get, malondialdehyde, which, is one of those terrible, terrible things in your body, especially found in seed oils. And cell death. You don't want your cells dying, right? So, vitamin C. So again, vitamin A, again, right, high dose, big amount of it. It'll cause increased oxidative stress. So you have an elevated burden of redox placed on your antioxidants, right? Which is why we went over vitamin E and C. So, the ascorbic acid plays a role to neutralize reactive oxygen species, and it's used up more rapidly if, again, right, you're not getting enough vitamin C, or your intake of vitamin A is so high it increases your demand for vitamin C, right? So, as I tell people, right, that come from an Accutane background, go on a low toxic diet, low vitamin A diet, a low nickel diet. These are generally going to be low in toxins, and it'll give your body the time it needs to rest, relax, and allow the burden of detox to come. So, vitamin C is essential for collagen stability. It's a cofactor for enzymes like prolyl hydroxylase and lysyl hydroxylase, and you need it for proper collagen cross-linking and structural integrity. So, again, right, vitamin A, right, especially take a crazy amount of it. It's known for increased skin turnover. It's important for the extracellular matrix remodeling and gene expression. But I do wonder, right, if a lot of vitamin A can be problematic, right, because you're increasing turnover so fast, like you never had a chance to breathe. You know what I mean? Like you're just rushing the job, and I don't know if systematically everything is able to do what it needs to do. And, like I said, over time, high dose nutrient depletion, so at some point, there might be some remodeling gone wrong, So here we're going to have the stimulation of collagen, right? This could be using up a lot more of your glycine when you think about it. Increasing matrix remodeling, altering fibroblast activity, increasing oxidative stress, which can impair collagen integrity, which means you might have weaker, little collagen sponges in your joints. You might have, not so beautiful skin the way it should be due to this. The scurvy, we talked about scurvy, vitamin A, inducing it. Again, oral health, you need it for your gum tissue health. And when you have a lot of that, vitamin A kicking out, displacing, or using up your vitamin C, however you wish to phrase it, then you would know you got the bleeding gums, and you would need to increase vitamin C to get back what you need. Fatigue and muscle function. Vitamin C plays a role in carnitine synthesis and mitochondrial function. Increased demand may contribute to fatigue and muscle discomfort. And again, to an extent, vitamin C helps to regenerate vitamin E. It also helps to an extent regenerate riboflavin, B2, and helps to regenerate to an extent glutathione, some parts of it. So vitamin C, although I think is really important, we need to understand that too much vitamin A could deplete you of vitamin C, which, is needed for a lot more than just being an antioxidant, right? It also recycles things further down the road, especially something as important as glutathione. Then you have play this role, right, in hypoxia-inducible factor 1 alpha through the prolyl hydroxylase enzyme to control degradation of HIP. And the thing is, if you have an inappropriate stimulation of HIP, due to a lack of vitamin C, you could have what's called pseudo-hypoxia, in which, although you may have enough oxygen, you feel asthma. Or when you breathe, you can't get that nice, good breathing down where you feel relieved, right? You feel like you have trouble breathing, but I mean, you're alive, you're fine, you're not dying, right? But you kind of have that kind of that issue, that troubleness where you can't catch a breath, and that's because it's influencing your hypoxia-inducible factor 1 alpha. Same thing with nickel. Nickel can also do this, which is terrible. So again, also could be the mucus, right? Some people they notice that they might get like bloody noses, fatigue, depression, pretty generic gingivitis, dry skin, inadvertently or indirectly, muscle weakness indirectly, joint and body aches, because again it plays a role with collagen synthesis. There was a study saying how if you increase your vitamin C with your collagen intake, that there's a crazy high percentage of how much better collagen synthesis will work in the body. So, again, women, you want to be beautiful and supple. It's always nice to pair collagen with vitamin C. Just throwing it out there, right? We want more beautiful women and want you to have married and kids and all that good stuff, right? You know, I was thinking about doing something controversial and saying, I'm tired of fat women and fat guys. Everybody needs to become, like hot and beautiful and have kids and have the next generation of the family. But I want to tie that at some point to put together something, right? Because I want to have kids in the future. You hear me talk, right? I want kids to be smarter, stronger, faster, good looking, just better than us in every single way possible, right? So smart they can solve any problem. And part of that is to get their nutrition down. And if you don't feed kids well or right, then their growth is stunted, their intellect goes down, and their potential to be something amazing is impacted. And I don't want that to happen. So I kind of hope, at some point with my influence on the next 2, 3 generations, they're going to be fucking amazing people, right? Amazing goods. All because we, you know, took back nutrition, right? And we stopped giving our nutrition to restaurants, which follows the guidelines, which are garbage, and they never helped anyone get better. It's just reality. So magnesium can contribute to, a big loss with a lot of vitamin A, right? Because again, you need it for your kidneys to handle electrolytes. It is involved a lot with stress signaling and demand on energy. It's a cofactor for a shit ton of things. Magnesium is just so everywhere, for lack of a better word. It's ubiquitous. So magnesium is tightly regulated by the kidneys, where it's filtered and reabsorbed, and then it helps with the increase of catecholamine activity, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So if you have stress, more or less, that's depleted. So again, we're talking about increased vitamin A. You're probably going to need a lot more magnesium during phase 1, phase 2 detox through glucuronidation, and you'll use up a good amount of that because you want to detox. It also is going to affect electrolyte balance, and that, let's say, for example, right, I have some people, right, they come to me, they get the issue with cramps. They don't drink enough water and they don't get enough sodium, right? Because when people start eating healthier, you stop eating fast food and a lot of food, restaurant food, right? They automatically add a ton of sodium, right, salt, to make it, very palatable and good tasting. So people often forget you got to add your own salt when you cook your own food. Low salt's bad, high salt's bad, above 5 grams. Sweet spot for salt is like 2-3 grams, right? 3 grams more likely. So don't forget about that. But if you do your salt right and you get your potassium right and still have cramps, that'll be very indicative of you needing magnesium and you have a deficiency in magnesium, which is why I tell people to, get magnesium cream. Specifically magnesium chloride cream, because it better absorbs than taking a pill, and the pills can be expensive. Even that shitty pill that's like 8 forms of magnesium in one, it just doesn't move the needle that much, and it's a waste of money. Same thing with magnesium L-threonate, right? Like, the marketing's so amazing that people never questioned, did magnesium never ever go in the brain? Well, of course it does. It's just marketing so good, You have Magtine, and, people think that's like the one thing. That's so magnesium can do it in its own right. So, I know. I just find that kind of weird. Okay, so again, right, you have this aldosterone activity, sodium retention, potassium magnesium losses arise, and you get basically electrolyte imbalance. This is because transient receptor potential myostatin 6 is directed inhibition by retinoic acid, although not established. I think it plays a role in using up a lot of it, in my opinion, of course. And again, you need magnesium for ATP production, right? For your Krebs cycle, or your citric acid cycle, however you want to call it. You want your mitochondria to be functional, so it gives you energy. So when you eat food, you get the energy out of it. So again, with the increased metabolic demand of vitamin A and cell turnover, you raise the requirement for needing more magnesium. Similar to like type 2 diabetes, where they got to pee out more because they want to get rid of the glucose, right? I think it's similar to how when you detox and you're conjugating the glucuronidation, you could pee it out. So if you're detoxing and you notice you pee a lot, and even though you're still taking your electrolytes like sodium and potassium, you might be increasing the need and demand for that because, again, you're trying to excrete out all that vitamin A that's been conjugated. So again, muscle twitching, cramps, tensions, eyelid spasms, right? That's a big one. People still get that twitch for no reason. They don't know why. It could also be too much calcium, right? That's also another issue for that. Some people can get less energy, as we've spoken about. Magnesium helps regulate heart rhythm and vascular tone. If you don't have enough magnesium, you might have palpitations where you like really feel like a heartbeat, elevated blood pressure, get the vasospasms, or tachycardia, right? Where you, again, right, you get the fast heartbeat. Mental health, you need to modulate your receptors in the brain, especially for glutamate, and to inhibit it. There's a balance you gotta strike. Too much glutamate ain't good. Low levels could contribute to anxiety, irritability, and neuronal excitability because you need that to help with balancing glutamate. Digestive function, you need magnesium to support bowel motility and digestive signaling like cholecystokinin, right? It also helps you feel fuller. So low levels may contribute to constipation and impaired digestion, despite you eating plenty of fats, healthy fats. Magnesium is involved in hormone synthesis, specifically your steroid hormones, like your sex hormones. Insulin sensitivity too, which means it could affect your endocrine balance and metabolic health. So, magnesium to an extent is needed for vitamin D to be activated. Low magnesium can impair vitamin D function, and this could compound issues earlier as we've spoken about. So one thing interesting is some people notice that when they take vitamin D, no, let's scratch that, my bad. Well, let's say, for example, let's say you either take vitamin D, right, low dose, or you get sunlight, right, same amount. And people notice when they get magnesium, right, that despite doing the same thing, the same routine without changing it, they have increased levels of vitamin D, which is interesting, which means more magnesium helps you get more vitamin D. So like a chicken and the egg, you need magnesium to help you increase your vitamin D levels. So maybe you won't need so much sun, right? So in ending, typical symptoms with a magnesium deficiency. One thing I do missed was poor sleep. Pain and soreness is important. Spasms again, if it wasn't the other electrolytes you might need. Then we go to zinc. Zinc is responsible for a ton of things in the body. I love it. Zinc is number one in my book, and that we're often low in because of the amount of detox we got to do in this toxic environment that we've been, bequeathed. So, it's a cofactor for hundreds of enzymes, regulatory proteins, talking about metabolism, detox, immune system, hormones, your antioxidants, and your cell signaling. So indirectly, vitamin A, because you got to detox it because it was too much. Again, high dose vitamin A, Accutane, that's Isotretinoin, will be increasing more demand for zinc to detox it. So again, right, it plays an important role for cytochrome P450, which is in your phase 1. You do need it to help with glucuronidation and other pathways in phase 2 conjugation. It also plays a role in aldehyde metabolism, where it converts alcohols into aldehydes, right, amongst other things. Antioxidant defense, tissue repair, and as a fluid acid buffer for intermediate metabolites. Meaning, although it's not exactly being antioxidant during the intermediate phase for those metabolites, which are very toxic, it kind of chaperones them in a buffering way to phase 2 where it gets conjugated. Then again, greater demand, you need it for methylthionine. Zinc needed to help you with the balance of copper, right? Don't want too much copper in the body. There's always a fine balance to be struck. It also has a role with superoxide dismutase, right? I'll talk about manganese later, but manganese is special in that it does in the mitochondria. Zinc is in the outside of it. So if you have less zinc, you might have more oxidative stress, more inflammation, lipid peroxidation gets worse, less cellular repair. You could affect NMDA receptor activity. So again, similar to magnesium. So one thing I've noticed, right, when I've been doing a lot of research is magnesium and zinc are like best friends. Like they're almost always together, which I find interesting. So yeah, it makes sense why you would have this kind of luck, right, of why you have increased neuronal excitability, anxiety, irritability, headaches, and sensory sensitivity due to either a lack of zinc or magnesium, right? Histamine, gut integrity, and immune function. You need it to help repair your intestinal barrier integrity, which is why people that do like a beef stock to fix leaky gut works rather well. Immune cell development. Zinc is, your number one guy for immune system, amongst a few other ones. Helps you with the regulation of histamine, although not alone. You'll need some other things to help you with that. So, again, right, increase intestinal permeability, leaky gut, if you lack the zinc. Increase allergies or histamine responses, if you lack the zinc. And reduce immune system resilience, right? So you might get sick more often if you lack zinc. When there was a very famous virus happening, a few years ago, people noticed when they took zinc, they felt a lot better and recovered quicker, right? And that's when I woke up to the concept that zinc is a lot more than just, male testosterone, right? Zinc is a lot more than having good hair. Zinc is a lot more than helping you with all these other things, right? It's actually really good for your immune system, right? Like, it's quite the juggernaut that could do a lot of things all at once. So, zinc is used a lot everywhere, and when it comes to detox, it could definitely be depleted. Needed for T cell signaling, natural killer cell activity, wound healing, skin repair. Helps you with your hair. So if you're having hair thinning and hair loss, right? And you took Accutane, and maybe you're not a lover of meat or eat a lot of red meat, you might notice your hair be thinning and looking kind of crappy. So an increase in zinc will help you with that, right? Which is why I'm so pivotal to the idea of red meat as a staple due to its increased zinc content, because we need zinc so much, especially if you're coming from Accutane background. You need zinc to help you regulate the aromatase enzyme, because when you lack zinc, you will then convert testosterone into estrogen, right? So men stop being like men. Men are more feminized. They're more mood swingy. They're more angry and irritable. And men lose that calm, cool, stoic badassness that comes with having your birthright of testosterone. So zinc will help you inhibit the aromatase so you can rebuild up your testosterone again. So you need it for estrogen balance and fat distribution. Women, some women with excess estrogen, known as estrogen overload, can get pretty fat and have stubborn weight loss. So women, you will need zinc to help you, balance your estrogen. So you could be beautiful and feminine without being obesively feminine, right? So, yeah, some women do struggle with that, and I hope this helps them. Sebum regulation and acne severity, right? So if you're thinking about taking Accutane, right, and you're like, man, this doctor makes a good point, right? If I take this drug for like a little bit, I'll never have acne ever again, and then boom, you get like 10, 20 years of side effects that hasn't gone away. So to people I say, right, you don't take Accutane. It sucks, it's horrible, it's very regrettable to everyone I've spoken to. I know people in the short term that are like, it's fucking awesome, I love it, you know, my skin's so beautiful. And then a few years later down the line, they're suffering terribly. And then they regret it, right? So again, right, always beware of short-term testimonials, right? Almost every product you ever see, right, they get you to do a review right at its best. You know, like you don't really see reviews 2, 3, 5 years later, because they're always going to be one-star reviews. Because then people wake up to the reality of what it is that they took, what it is that they were being dealt with, and then they realize, well, this thing wasn't actually awesome in the first place. Again, marketing. So zinc is really important, right? Especially if you're a person who's diabetic or you have metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, because you do need zinc for the zinc ions. They're concentrated in the beta cells of the pancreas, in which it plays a role with insulin synthesis, storage, and secretion. So some people, right, that are diabetic, they take more zinc. They notice improvements in their blood sugar, which is awesome. So the takeaway is you need it for everything. Zinc's awesome. It's amazing. Take zinc, or just eat more meat, right? You know, keep it simple, right? You don't supplement too much with zinc, then you're pushing detox too much, and then you feel like shit, right? So, you know, again, right? It's talk about. It's about a fine balance to feel well. Let's see, did I miss anything? Yeah, so people on Accutane, especially men, have noticed they can't get erections and they have no sex drive. So that's terrible, right? Men should have a libido. Hair loss, I'm sure for a lot of men, you know, going bald at an early age. I mean, there's men balding in their 20s, and it could be due to this Accutane or high vitamin A, which is not a good thing, right? Uh, Skin rash with eczema, I mean, yeah, zinc helps a lot with that. Loss of taste and smell, we know about that big one, right? With that flu of a few years ago, people noticed, oh, if you lost your taste and your smell, right, but you're not exactly congested, it could be due to a lack of zinc. So, you know, just signs to look out for if this may be you, right? Because I'm not you, I'm not me, but you know yourself. So you can look at this thing and be like, wow, that is me, and I gotta probably take more zinc, right? Or eat more beef. So calcium, I should probably just skip it because I already went over this, basically. I mean, every time I talk about vitamin K2, I always talk about calcium, so it's... Yeah, I mean... But pretty much, it's all the same shit I covered. Okay, so just to refresh where I wasn't very explanatory. So in the case of excessive bone resorption or altered vitamin D signaling may contribute to elevated blood calcium levels, known as hypercalcemia or having too much calcium. This dysregulation can overlap with deficiencies in magnesium and vitamin D because they're deeply connected. Bone pain and, you know, fragile bones, right? They break easily. Fatigue, constipation. You got to pee more or drink more water, right? Although I would argue this is probably, you know, lack of electrolytes. Specifically potassium. Kidney stone risk, yes. Cardiac rhythm disturbances, yes, because electrolytes all impact the heart to balance it. Traits convert stiffness, yes, because you're getting, you know, calcification in the wrong places. Okay, just to reiterate this further, vitamin D helps absorb calcium. Magnesium activates vitamin D to regulate muscle and nerve function. Vitamin K2 helps to direct calcium into the bones away from your soft tissues. And again, calcium is the building block, providing the structural support for bones and teeth. I have a link to an article here where I talk about this more in depth. So other symptoms of calcium deficiency to look out for. If your nails break really easily, it could be, you know, low calcium. If you get Easy fractures, I mean, usually this is older people, but, this isn't to say this doesn't happen in young people too, right? It could be that. Dry skin, kinda, but not really. Again, you're coming from Accutane, so, it's that increased turnover and lack of, a lot of things. And, it's because I haven't even covered the B vitamins. And I'll cover that in the next video because this would have been too long of a video, and I don't want to have long videos. I want to respect my time. I want to respect your time, and just, something pretty digestible. Tooth decay, if you're lacking the calcium and your pulp is exposed, that could be an issue. And again, if you have cavities, tooth decay, stop eating sugar or stop eating so much sugar and, reduce your carbs, go low carb, keto, carnivore, one of them, whichever works best for your body. Too much sugar causes it. I don't give a fuck how much you brush your teeth, because again, right, you're letting sugar ferment in your mouth and you're getting cavities. It's simple, it's easy. If a dentist told you to, stop eating sugar, they'd lose money, but they're like, nah, you'll do it anyway, you fucking retard. Like, you go to the dentist, they fucking tell you, they're assholes. They're fucking assholes. It's kind of funny. They're like, I know you're not going to stop eating candy. I'll see you next week, But, it's important to be mindful as parents, right, that you teach your kids to give them a reason why eating a lot of candy is bad. Don't just say it's bad. They're kids, right? They're growing up. They want to be smart. They want your sponges. Tell them why. Tell them eating a lot of sugar will cause bacteria in your mouth that will cause tooth decay. And they'll be like, okay, thank you, Mom or Dad. That makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate it. And then, if you're more well-versed into low carb, you can go crazy with it and just like, have them think, oh, okay, yeah, so there's a balance to be struck. Don't do too much sugar or carbs, So copper and iron. I might want to link to a different video on this one, because I can explain it really well. But we'll keep it easy. So copper is transported through the body by ceruloplasmin, so is iron. It's important, with the conversion of ferrous iron to ferric iron. Ferrous 2 is oxidative and inorganic, and ferric iron. Wait, that is right. I did it right. Yeah, ferrous and ferric. Yeah. Okay, so point being, right, you get a conversion that goes on, right? And ceruloplasmin, just as it transfers and mobilizes copper, it also is required for iron. So copper may be present in tissues, but not effectively transported where it needs to be. Same thing with iron. So again, right, if you don't have enough copper, which I don't think is an issue for many people, quite frankly, most people should be fine, right? Unless you have like severe anemia, it's not caused by that. So here we have iron balance and regulation, which is controlled by hepcidin, which is a liver-derived hormone that regulates iron absorption and release from storage tissues. So retinoic acid, vitamin A, it definitely does impact hepcidin signaling. When you have reduced hepcidin signaling, this less activity may increase iron absorption in the intestines, right? So iron becomes sequestered as ferritin for protective response. The body may restrict iron if you're sick with a bacterial or viral infection or whatever have you. So you need zinc to open that lock. If you're sick after an infection and you don't take any zinc, you could be anemic, but still have all the iron. It's just not accessible to your body because you locked it away to protect against bacteria, because bacteria loves to feast on iron to grow and multiply and to fuck you up, right? So you need zinc, the key to open iron, so you can then utilize it correctly by your body, right? And that's why some people may have anemia due to a zinc deficiency that didn't open up their iron storage to be utilized. So you need iron for energy production, red blood cell formation, and so this is also interesting too, right? A high amount of retinoic acid can downregulate ceruloplasmin, which transports copper and iron, leading to a functional deficiency, meaning copper and iron can be stored in the tissues and not be used, right? Until you reduce vitamin A, there may be transport issues with the utilization of copper and iron. Retinoic acid is known to reduce hepcidin, which increases the absorption of iron. with low zinc, as I talked about, it may lead to anemia where, you have locked away iron as ferritin and zinc metallothionein. And in the case of iron overload, a deficiency in molybdenum could be responsible as to why hepcidin is not properly regulated to prevent the absorption of iron, and I'm going to link it here to this thing, because I know I'll explain it way better in the other video. So in essence, this could be fatigue, anemia, weak connective tissue, like matt skin and joints, low dopamine production, like you're just not super happy, like the dopamine reward that hits. Iron overload and other copper-related issues, like a lack of copper superoxide dismutase, the SOD. And yeah. So here's an example, right? We can use low hepcidin, high hepcidin, right? Iron uptake, you have ferritin, and then boom, it goes. If you have high iron uptake, you have the ferritin, they have hepcidin, and it blocks it, right? Because hepcidin says, hey man, this is too much. We're going to balance it so you don't have an iron overload, and then your body will then get rid of it. Usually you slide off through your intestinal cells. But when you have low hepcidin, right, due to increased vitamin A, you could increase the absorption of iron to a great deal. And this is why I think liver won in like 1933, 1934. It won like a Nobel Prize that it helps people with anemia, which is interesting, right? Because you have high copper, which makes your hepcidin very low. There is liver, of course, and liver, so you're having a ton of it enter your body all at once without having the checks and balances to stop it, hepcidin. And then there's also a lot of copper, right? So you're also able to mobilize it, right? So it makes sense how if someone is anemic, giving them liver can actually help them. But I don't recommend it because, again, right, you don't need to eat liver because we're talking about high amounts of vitamin A and copper and even heavy metals that are in there. And I help people, right, that have vitamin A toxicity, which is a lot similar to Accutane toxicity. Essentially, it's the same thing, the same detox pathways. So I treat them essentially the same, only that the Accutane people take a lot longer to heal and get better because, again, they took a crazy amount of it. And for the people that were organ-based carnivores, they went kind of crazy in the beginning, eating the superfood, and the superfood became super toxic. It took time, right? So again, this is why you're here and watching my video, because that's probably you. So manganese, similar to vitamin C and E, manganese is becoming increasingly utilized during elevated periods of oxidative stress. And this is because high levels of vitamin A, blah blah blah, more inflammation, blah blah blah, affects your mitochondria, your fats, and your redox balance of having this excess oxidation. So manganese is critical for manganese superoxide dismutase, also known as SOD2. And what makes manganese interesting is it operates specifically inside the mitochondria, which is where you need to make energy, right? So it converts highly reactive superoxide radicals into less harmful molecules, so they can't damage the mitochondrial membranes, your DNA, electron transport chain proteins, and ATP producing symptoms. So again, remember, you're converting superoxide dismutase, right, into hydrogen peroxide, which would then be broken down by glutathione peroxidase or catalase. As far as I know, right, I don't think there's anything else that'll break down hydrogen peroxide. I do know there's like backup systems, like what's it called, like sulfoxide or sulfoxarine or thioxine or thyroxine. I'm getting that wrong completely, right? But I know like there are backup systems for when your glutathione intercatalase go down, but even then it's not enough, right? Because again, right, you shouldn't be in that issue in the first place, and that could be why people are getting like white hair at a young age. Not gray hair, but like just like white hair. Because again, right, you're getting that bleaching effect from the hydrogen peroxide. So manganese is something we need small amounts of. You don't need to like take a big dose of a manganese supplement at all. Just yeah. you don't need a lot of it. It's a trace. It's very much a trace mineral, and they need very small amounts. Because some trace minerals you need a lot, some you don't. And I think manganese is one of those where you don't need as much. Also plays a role with cartilage formation, connective tissue maintenance, glycosaminoglycan synthesis. So again, right, it helps you a lot with your joints. And it's interesting how, when you think about it, right, people talk about collagen for your joints and vitamin C for your joints, right? But you can't forget about manganese. He also plays a little role. Like they all work together. And that's often, uh, it's just not popular, right? But he deserves a little bit more popularity. It also helps to an extent with glucose metabolism, mitochondrial energy production. As we know, it has SOD. So, if you're highly vulnerable to mitochondrial dysfunction, oxidative stress of your nervous system, it could be because you're compromised with your antioxidants, meaning neurons may experience more damage, less ATP, more inflammation, and you could be at some sort of neurodegenerative risk. So, again, we talked about all these. Another one to add would be reduce exercise recovery, lower energy. Again, just to reiterate, SOD in terms of manganese is important due to the role of it in the mitochondria, whereas zinc and copper work outside of that. And zinc and copper don't, as far as I'm aware, zinc and copper cannot do what the manganese does for the mitochondria. So in some cases of there being a manganese deficiency, impaired glucose transport, more epilepsy and schizophrenia, loss of hair color, issues with blood clotting, people aren't growing the way they should be, right? Especially, kids and teenagers, impaired nerve stimulus on the muscles, and diminish reproductive ability of reduced sex hormones and impaired sperm formation. So, again, right, people talk about boron and all this crap, and I'm like, well, manganese plays a little role there too. He's cool too. I mean, no one's as important as the king, zinc, right? But, yeah, I mean, you can't forget about the little guy. He's important too. Then we have selenium. Again, if you're depleted in selenium, you're going to have trouble with your thyroid, and it's gonna, you have trouble with your glutathione production too. So again, you have a lot of vitamin A, increased demand for everything to try and detox it, right? It's an essential mineral you need, right? Trace mineral for selenoproteins, for antioxidant defense, thyroid, hormone metabolism, your T4, T3, and so on, immune regulation, redox balance, and cell protection. So where selenium is really important, right, is needed for glutathione peroxidase, right? And it helps you to, after SOD does its job right, superoxide dismutase, dismutase superoxides, the superoxide turns into hydrogen peroxide, and a glutathione peroxidase helps break it down. So you would need selenium for that. To neutralize harmful peroxides, lipid oxidation products before they damage cell structures. We know that. So again, if you don't have any, you have less of it, of course, like logically. It helps you to protect the tissues of thyroid, liver, brain, and cardiovascular systems. Selenium plays a big role in helping your metabolism and helping your thyroid and regulating your temperature, you're having your thirst, your hunger, a lot of things, right? Thyroid is really important. So it protects your thyroid from oxidative damage. It converts inactive T4 hormone into the active T3 hormone, which does the magic through deiodinase enzymes. If you lack selenium, you will have slower metabolic activity, more oxidative stress. You could have a conversion efficiency that becomes less efficient. And it'll resemble basically hypothyroidism or subclinical borderline hypothyroidism, depending on how your doctor wants to, define it. They're all different. So, because you need this, right, and you're lacking it due to your high dose vitamin A induced selenium deficiency, right? You have less metabolic resilience, more fatigue, you're always tired. You're going to feel hotter than usual, and you're going to feel colder than usual, right? So if you're in a room and everyone's cool and they're chill and you're just super frigid, it could be you have an issue with your thyroid. If you're outside and the heat feels incredibly intolerable and everyone's like, yeah, it's hot, but it's not that bad, then again, it's probably an issue with low thyroid, right, or hypothyroidism. So here are symptoms of hypothyroidism, or a selenium insufficiency, you could say, right? And the reason I bring it up is because a lot of people that do take Accutane, they do eventually have some kind of hypothyroidism. And I want to make it known, and they'll be like, okay, well, this makes sense now. Thank you for making that connection for me in my own health, right? So, it could be chronic fatigue, low energy, brain fog, and terrible poor concentration. You feel cold, or cold is just too cold when it's not that cold. Like, you feel like you're freezing when it's just cool. Cold hands and cold feet. Your extremities feel colder. Weight gain, usually weight gain, but some people, it's going to be usually stubborn body fat that's hard to lose. Hair thinning and hair texture changes. Loss of outer eyebrow density, right? Like it looks like it's thinning. Reduced metabolic efficiency. And, like it's never just one thing, right? Like it could be other things affecting you too, right? So it's not just vitamin A, right? But it could be exposure to other things. Like we talked about mold, we talked about, chemicals, plastics, xenoestrogens, all that kind of stuff affecting your thyroid and its function. I think a big one I need to mention, right, is people exposed to halogens, right, like bromides and fluorides, and I think even chlorines to some extent, right, can actually displace their iodine. I kind of jumped again on this, but yeah, that could be an issue. Talked about all this. So yeah, big one is the nails look like ruffle chips. You know, like if you touch a nail, right, it's like smooth and it's a nice nail. But for some people, right, you touch their nails and it's like rough, like hard lines, like you're stroking a ruffle chips, and that's usually a thyroid issue. Don't forget about low libido. It's like everything when you're unhealthy. Stress becomes more stressful. And yeah, selenium's important for a lot of things. Directly with the selenoproteins, right? Reduce oxidative stress, helps with the protein folding, reduces endoplasmic reticulum stress and protein aggregation, right? It helps them, go forward. Anti-inflammatory, improves your immune system. Mitochondrial protection, of course. Again, big one for your thyroid. Protects heart tissue, protects your skeleton muscle, and reduces endothelial dysfunction. So yeah, I think selenium's a real big one. And again, I love meat so much, right? I love red meat. I love beef. I love bison. I love lamb. Because not only is that rich in zinc, it's also rich in selenium too, right? So, like, red meat is quite the combo, right? Especially in terms of your minerals. So don't skimp out on meat, I tell my clients, try and eat meat every day. As much as you can. 11, molybdenum. So, usually it's depleted. Aldehyde burden and detox, it's a big one. Because it's just like manganese. No one talks about molybdenum. They're like the forgotten M's to an extent. So it's a trace mineral, but it does interesting things, right? Especially for sulfite oxidase, it converts sulfites into sulfur. So if you're the kind of person that drinks a lot of wine and you feel like shit, it says you're not converting the sulfites into sulfur, and that's probably why people get the headaches, right, when they drink the wine or anything that contains a lot of sulfites. You need it for homocysteine metabolism, sulfur detoxification, for your cysteine and methionine conversions, especially during acetylation, amino acid conjugation, and yeah, homocysteine, and indirectly with cysteine for your glutathione. Because there is recycling and conversions going on if you're not getting enough of it. Xanthine oxidase, here helping to break down purines into uric acid during nucleotide metabolism. Aldehyde oxidase, right? Yeah, I'm tired, man. It's already been an hour. And a long day. But I'm trying my best. So, aldehyde oxidase. It participates in phase 1 detox by metabolizing aldehydes and nitrogen-containing compounds from drugs, neurotransmitters, alcohol metabolism, and oxidative stress. It's a big one because at some point in the detox of vitamin A, because again we're talking about like 13-cis-retinoic acid. You have conversions of it being like alcohols into aldehydes, and the aldehyde could be a rate limited step. So you will need molybdenum to help with that conversion to then carry it on to like phase 2 in the conjugation and to then get rid of it. So for a lot of people, molybdenum could be the game changer, right? I think it's a game changer. I think it's a game changer in that it could be what was missing all along, if you know what I mean. Like it really moves the needle on your detox. Then you have Mark for, mitochondrial detox systems and processing of certain drug metabolites. So as you know, oxidation, blah blah. Blah 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 blah. I wrote this a lot for people to read, but as I'm doing this presentation, like, it's just like beating a dead horse. So, when sulfite oxidase is impaired or you lack molybdenum, what happens is you have this increase in sulfites, and you might get headaches and migraines, you might get irritation in your breathing, you might have digestive discomfort, and increased chemical sensitivity. I would view this as a person that has strong scent, right? Like you're not exactly a dog or a cat, but like you're so like toxic and your detox is kind of messing that anything that's a smell will be a lot more sensitive, right? Mitochondrial function and neurological effects. Again, beating a dead horse, so we got it. Yeah. Hepatic stress may increase, bile flow and detox efficiency may be impaired, cholestatic pattern liver dysfunction will become more likely. And again, right, I'm always harping on these important things, right? Zinc, selenium, glutathione-related systems, and B vitamins. Together, they'll help you maintain normal detox capacity and metabolic resilience over time. You need it for your hepcidin to function correctly. We talked about this already, but if you want to look more on this, be my guess. So symptoms of aldehyde accumulation can look like acne and skin problems, especially on the forehead and the temple, fatigue, mitochondrial dysfunction, brain fog, inability to focus, short attention span, mood swings and anxiety, potential liver congestion like cholestasis, and lack of molybdenum alongside other detox minerals may gradually accrue a backed up amount of toxic metabolites in the liver, causing a sluggish, overloaded liver. And as NTPs, we use the idea of a stress bucket where you have all these toxins in your fat cells in your liver, and you're not giving your body the nutrients it needs. This bucket fills and it overflows and it's spelling, and that's when you get symptoms that are not so good. So the whole goal is to give your body the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, amino acids, and fatty acids that you need, so you can then throw out that water from the stress bucket properly, so it's not going to overflow and, drown you. We already spoke about the hepcidin and the iron. Again, talked about molybdenum and what it does with the oxidases. So you can find it in potatoes and bananas, and yogurt. Again, don't do beef, liver, and don't do black-eyed peas. Last but not least, iodine. So a thyroid gland depends on the sodium iodide symporter. Essentially, you need sodium to help you chaperone iodine, essentially, right? From the blood into the thyroid tissue. Vitamin A signaling can influence the expression of your thyroid and its transport proteins, and excessive retinol exposure, therefore, could impair iodine uptake, efficiency, or the response of the thyroid directly. If iodine transport becomes less efficient, thyroid hormone synthesis may decline, thyroid reserve capacity may become reduced, and metabolic slowing may occur despite adequate iodine intake. So again, similar to hypothyroidism, that could happen to with iodine if you're lacking some of it. Now, you don't need a ton of iodine. Some people do a shit ton with glucose iodine, and I don't think it's helpful. I think just a bit of iodized salt can help you, right? Nothing too crazy, just a little bit every now and then. Eat good quality fish, every now and then, and you'll be fine, right? You'll get the iodine you need. Some people like seaweed. I mean, it's okay every now and then, right? But, you just need a little bit of iodine, and you'll be fine, right? You don't need a crazy amount of it. So again, thyroid hormone production actually generates hydrogen peroxide, which is required by thyroid peroxidase to oxidize iodide and incorporate iodine into the thyroglobulin for thyroid hormone synthesis. So you do need that, the hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is what we call a necessary pro-oxidant. Your body makes it because it needs to make conversions happen in a chemistry kind of sense, right? Biochemistry kind of sense. It's not bad. It's just if you don't have your regulation up right, then it could cause more problems. And that's the last thing you want. Last thing you want is more problems, because everything needs a balance. So the thing you did to stop inflammation is going to cause more inflammation, so you need to stop that inflammation from happening. If that makes any sense. So this requires help from selenium-dependent glutathione systems, glutathione peroxidase, and adequate mitochondrial resilience. There's a lot of vitamin A, a little bit of peroxidation, less hormones from your thyroid, thyrocytes become injured, blah blah. Liver, function, it helps actually with thyroid, right? So a lot of people don't know this, right? But you have a thyroid-liver connection. Like the liver helps with your thyroid. The thyroid isn't all by itself, so people often forget about that, right? So if you have a bad thyroid, you probably also have a bad liver. And you put in the work to help heal and fix your liver and detox it, then as a consequence, your thyroid will also improve. Which is why when some people do a proper liver detox over time, they notice their hypothyroidism goes away and they become normalized. Which is kind of beautiful, right? How things work in sync together. And you get them right, you get them right. So an issue is reverse T3. It's the active form that slows down metabolic activity. Basically, it's not doing anything and it's not supposed to, it should have been T3. Could contribute to hypothyroidism. Again, high vitamin A could regulate the balance of your T cells. It could mess with your cytokine signaling. It could increase your Th1 and Th17 immune activity. If you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, amongst other things, right? Because it's never just one thing, usually. Because all these things here affect your liver, right? Whether you have bad genetics in some capacity when it comes to detoxing, or, like your folate with the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme, or COMT, which is the catechol O-methyltransferase enzyme mutation, depending if you have a wild type or the other one. Exposure to toxic stuff in the environment, like heavy metals, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, nickel, and so on. Iodine displacement of other halogens like fluoride, which, I don't recommend fluoride toothpaste because the non-fluoride stuff works even better. They have like xylitol and other stuff, and they're pretty effective at killing your, bacteria. They even have the coconut oil in it. It's pretty cool. Bromide, this is from bread. For some reason, the dough conditioner is using a form of bromide, and that could mess with your iodine. And chlorine, I'm not too sure on the chlorine. I don't think there's much of a connection there, but it could impact your thyroid, I think. I'm not too sure on that, but yes. Stress, sleep, and under-eating. Again, it's a big one. If your thyroid becomes sluggish, you might not be eating enough, you might be doing too much fasting, or you're doing one meal a day, which I don't usually recommend, but yeah, you gotta eat well enough for your body, because I don't think we need calories, right? Because it's a bad measurement, but more or less calories is a decent measurement to let you know if you're eating enough, right? Because it's one thing to want to eat to lose weight, but it's another thing to have low calories to lose weight, and, you can lose calories by eating more, It's a matter of just resolving your liver issues so your liver can function better. and to get the minerals and B vitamins you need so your body can, make the energy it needs and do what it's got to do. So, sluggish energy and chronic fatigue, weight gain or difficult losing weight, basically all the stuff we talked about. Uh, Depression, apathy, and low motivation, brain fog, memory issues, constipation, slower digestion is also a big one with thyroid dysfunction. A hoarse voice when you talk a lot, and sometimes a sore throat, right? You can't exercise as much, and you have a shortness of breath usually. Because again, vitamin A messes with all this stuff, right? So high levels of vitamin A, Accutane, retinoic acid will downregulate thyroid-stimulating hormone receptors, and thyroid-stimulating hormone simulated iodine uptake into thyroid gland. This occurs as too much retinoic acid binds to retinoic acid receptors and retinoid X receptors in thyroid cells, disrupting proper thyroid hormone signaling. Your sodium iodide symporter can be inhibited by too much retinoic acid, reducing uptake of iodine and transportation even if you have enough iodine present, right? Liver dysfunction occurs when there is too much retinoic acid, affecting the deiodinase conversions of T4 to reverse T3 instead of active T3, causing a hypothyroid state. Oxidation of iodide from I'm sorry I'm blanking, but it's basically the ion with a negative and negative plus can promote excess lipid peroxidation of hydrogen peroxide with increased retinoic acid damaging thyrocytes, decreasing thyroid peroxidase, which puts iodine into thyroglobulin. Too much retinoic acid may aggravate hypothyroid into Hashimoto's by increasing Th1 and 17, creating a sort of autoimmune-like environment by compromising regulatory T cells. So as you know, the symptoms, the ruffle like nails is a big one, lots of hair, you're not as thirsty as you should be, also you're very cold in extremities, of course. So moral of the story, is vitamin A toxic? Yes, it is toxic in high doses, of course. And that's because we're now seeing that it's causing also nutrient deficiencies. Because you're trying to detox it. Like it's just too much to have in your body, man. Too much of anything's bad. Like I love zinc, right? But too much zinc is bad for you. I love vitamin D, but too much vitamin D is bad for you. Like too much of anything is bad. And if no one has ever told you that, then they need to be looking at these kind of things, right? Because excess can cause issues, whereas not having enough of anything can, of course, cause issues. But in terms of people that are coming from Accutane, they have way more vitamin A than anybody else. They have a high creatine reserve in their body fat and their liver, so they can go on a low vitamin A diet and they'll do well because they're still releasing it continually over time. And again, right, just the concept, right? Too much of anything can bottleneck things. It can cause issues and disrupt balance. So again, right, vitamin D can affect calcium metabolism if you have too much. Too much vitamin B3 can affect methylation, as it's a methyl sink, and, could affect your vitamin B9 and B12 for methylation. Too much synthetic B9 can, in a form of folic acid, can cause a metabolic bottleneck, affecting your folate. Too much zinc inhibits copper. Too much copper inhibits zinc. Too much molybdenum inhibits copper. So again, right, it's all about balance. Too much sodium may need more potassium. Same thing with magnesium, and so on. So we're right back to the beginning, where too much of one thing can cause more of an issue. And yeah, an ending, that's basically what I just wanted to share. Want to get my point across. This was almost an hour and 20 minutes. So yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Leave a comment. Let me know if connections were made based off your symptoms, right? Like, oh yes, I am hypothyroid, or yes, I have issues with my manhood, or you're a woman and you're losing hair, right? Whatever issues you may have, right? Dry eyes, dry skin, all the Accutane crap that you read from the black box label. I'm trying to understand and explain this in such a way where we can learn that these symptoms are caused by high vitamin A, increasing demand for nutrients that eventually gets depleted because you needed too much of something all at once, right? Imagine you're shipping 100 pounds of, I don't know, bricks for a construction site, right? And all of a sudden the project gets real big and they need 1,000 bricks and then 2,000 bricks, but you can only do 100 bricks at a time, right? Eventually, you know, the bottleneck's going to catch up and, you won't have a complete building. So I'm trying to complete the bridge of this building so I make the connection so we can then get better, right? But again, I recommend looking at my previous video, which I explain the whole vitamin A toxicity, the whole Accutane thing, so you know more or less what foods you should eat and what you should do to listen to your body, because everyone's a little different. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of tired today. I did a lot today. I've had a busy week. So again, yeah, guys, thank you. God bless y'all. Have an amazing day and a great weekend. And yeah, stay amazing.